لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ. For men, especially, even for men, there's going to be a portion, مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ, from what both parents left behind, وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ, and what the closest relatives left behind. وَلِلنِّسَاءِ. This is revolution in Arab world. This is a revolution in the Arab world when these ayat came down. وَلِلنِّسَاءِ. And even for women, نَصِيبٌ. There's going to be a portion. مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ. From what parents and close relatives left behind. You know why this was a revolution? Women themselves were considered property. In much of Arabia. Not all of it, but in much of Arabia. They themselves were considered property. I told you before, they used to, when the father would die, the son in some cases would actually inherit the other wives of the father. It was a disgusting practice called maqt. Maqtan wasa'a sabila. Okay? وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا مَا نَكَحَ أَبَاؤُكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ. You know? And then Allah says, إِنَّهُ كَانَ مَقْتًا فَاحِشَةً وَمَقْتًا وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. Anyhow, so now women have a set right in inheritance. They have a right to property ownership. They have these kinds of civil rights. These civil rights came to the West early on or later? They came way later. This was completely revolutionary for its time. What's funny is now you turn around and say Islam is unfair to women. Islam was fair to women at a time when where people would have complained Islam gives too much to women. It's all a matter of what age you live in. If somebody, the kuffar heard these ayat and their complaint against Islam was, why is it favoring women so much? You turn the clock a little and now you come to the point and people complain, why doesn't Islam give women anything? وَلِلنِّسَاءِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ. Women also have a portion, a good portion. Nasib is something you find with a marking on it. So it's set for you. It's a set portion of what both parents and close relatives left behind. مِمَّا قَلَّ مِنْهُ أَوْ كَثُرٍ. From what may be little out of it or maybe a lot. نَصِيبًا مَفْرُوضًا. It is a portion that has been mandated. وَإِذَا حَضَرَ الْقِسْمَةَ أُولُو الْقُرْبَى. Another very interesting situation, a social situation. Somebody died, and they left a lot of assets behind. And in those assets, the will is discovered, and in the will, the uncle gets this, the cousin gets that, this and that and the other. And of course, according to the Sharia, it's done, the proportions are done. But there's an event held where the relatives are gathered together, they're sitting down, and the lawyer or the one who's going to execute the estate, he's pronouncing this one gets this one gets that, this one gets that. You can imagine the scene. I don't know if you've ever seen a movie like that, because of course you haven't. But this scene is happening where the inheritors are now coming together to collect whatever portion was made out to them. So this is called al-qisma. Qisma literally means division, but it's the occasion of the division. Okay? So who's going to attend it? Ulul qurba wal yatama wal masakin. When other close relatives, orphans, poor people hear that rich man died and his inheritance is being delivered today, it's being distributed today. Somehow the word got out. So they showed up at the gate. Maybe they'll get some sadaqah today. Maybe somebody will give them something. They're not saying we have a shared inheritance. They're just saying, look, I'm your relative. I'm having a hard time. This isn't money that you earned yourself. This isn't some hard work you did and you're getting this money. This is a fadl from Allah, that inheritance is being passed down to you. So it shouldn't be so hard for you to give sadaqah out of it. So they showed up. فَارْزُقُوهُمْ مِنْهُ. Then don't be like, oh my God, what are they doing here? These greedy people. Who's there? You are. You're there to collect, and it's not like you earned it, and now you're looking down on them, those people that are asking. And by the way, nobody decent goes and asks, right? And you can imagine they really have to be in a tough situation to be like that. To have to come and ask. Especially it began with ulul qurba. Relatives don't like to put their hands out in front of other relatives. It's very difficult. It's very embarrassing. For them to come out and do that. And the orphan, if he wasn't starving to death, he wouldn't be at your gate. You know, al-masakin, these people that are completely stuck, that have to humiliate themselves in this way, they wouldn't be there if they didn't have to. So you don't have to go out of your way to embarrass them even more. They're already embarrassed as it is. They're already in that state. So just give them. فَارْزُقُوهُمْ مِنْهُ وَقُولُوا لَهُمْ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. And treat them with respect. Speak to them in decent fashion. Treat them kindly. And this ayah, this is the one we're going to end with. Man, this ayah is so awesome on this subject. Imagine somebody's on the inside, the one who's going to inherit, the one who's doing well, and on the outside there's a child, this orphan, who's hoping to get something out of this. The one inside looks at the child and says, what are these kids doing? Get out of here. Allah says, don't you have a child? Do you have a child too? Allah appeals to his conscience and says, وَلْيَخْشَى الَّذِينَ لَوْ تَرَكُوا مِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّةً ضِعَافًا. Then those who possibly they would have left behind them weak children. Imagine Allah killed you right now and your children are at home with a babysitter, weak. Can't do anything for themselves. ذُرِّيَّةً ضِعَافًا خَافُوا عَلَيْهِمْ. They would fear upon them. Wouldn't you fear, what's going to happen to my kids if I die? How are they going to live? What's their life going to be like? Aren't you afraid of that? When you see that orphan, why don't you see your own child? That's literally the call of the ayah. When you see that orphan, you should imagine your child in that situation and then should put the fear of God in you. You know? So, وَلْيَخْشَى الَّذِينَ لَوْ تَرَكُوا مِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ ذُرِّيَّةً ضِعَافًا خَافُوا عَلَيْهِمْ. They would have feared upon them. Then, فَلْيَتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. Then they better seek protection from Allah. They better watch out from the wrath of Allah, because Allah can make that happen. They better watch out. They're treading thin, they're walking thin ice. وَلْيَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا. And they should speak upright, clear speech. Sadid comes from the word sad. Sad means wall. You know, like Surah Al-Kahf, sad is wall. From it you get sadda, the verb sadda. Sadda means to put rocks inside a hole, like a crack in the wall, and you're filling it up with rocks. Or there's a hole in the gate, and you're trying to fill it in with pebbles and stones so that the hole doesn't come through. Or you're trying to patch up a dam. That's also called sadda. Okay? And from it eventually, the word sad in modern Arabic got to be known as what? Dam, like a Saddul Ali, right? Saddul Kabir fi Sudan. You remember? Okay. Then, figuratively from that is extracted the phrase, qawlun sadid. Speech that has no cracks in it. Speech that doesn't have, flaw in it. It's straightforward, it's explicit, it's direct, and it prevents from confusion. In other words, the orphan says, Did you get anything that you might be able to spare? Well, there's a lot of complication, and the legal proceedings are going to take some time, and you're just going round and round in circles. Just say it straightforward, yes. And inshallah, here's your portion. I'd like you to have this. And treat them with respect. وَلْيَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا. They should speak in an upright, decent, respectable fashion. These ethics, in these few ayat that Allah Azza wa Jalla has laid down, of how people should be dealt with, how orphans should be dealt with, they are of paramount importance across time. But my question to you and myself is, when we go to the masjid and make salat, how do we know somebody's an orphan? How do we know? We don't have an orphan sticker. Right? We don't know what the people that even pray next to us are going through. You know why? Because we don't get to know people's families. Our sense of community is still very shallow. Our idea of community is you drive to a masjid, you make salat, you go home. That's community. Community means you know families. When you go to Jumu'ah, you meet a Muslim, you don't just say salam to them, you get to know them, you go to dinner together, you invite them over to your house. More Muslims get to know each other. Little by little, all the families know each other. And when families know each other, we know who died and who's around and who's going through a tough time and who's buried under debt, and therefore you're able to help them. They're not going to come and beg. They're not going to come and beg. And that's what we're supposed to be. Look, even here, the orphans came, but they didn't ask.